Hi there, little berries. I thought I'd do another anecdotes video. Now this is going to be about, let me just get him, this little one. This boy, Sebastian. Yeeth. As you can see, Sebbie, all right, has just one eye. And a lot of people say to me, how did he lose his eye? Well, let me tell you. Got to go back a little bit. Now he's walking around my lap at the moment, trying to find a comfortable place to lie down. You might hear him purr, actually. Where the other half and I live now, we have to go back to where we lived before, and this is going back over 5 years. Mitzi, the other cat we got, the tortoiseshell cat, we've had her 9 years. After we were at our old place for quite some time, we actually took in a stray cat. Well, we thought he was a stray. He was actually microchipped. But whoever he was supposed to be living to, they weren't taking paying much attention to him. He was riddled with fleas. He was dirty. He was scrawny. He had underlying health problems. The RSPCA were able to overturn ownership to us. So we kept him and made sure he was, well fed and everything, but his health problems were quite bad. It was a long-standing overactive thyroid that had already taken its toll on his kidneys and everything. And sadly, a few months after we got him, I had to have him put to sleep. And oh God, I was thinking of doing a YouTube video about him a few years ago, but honestly, it was so heartbroken. I don't think I could have done it. I probably will do a video on him soon. It's been nearly 6 years since he passed away, but I just can't go into too much detail because it doesn't matter how much time passes, it just still really hurts. Now, it wasn't intended this way, but it was exactly a year later to the day that Trevor, his name was, we called him, the day that Trevor was put down, that we got Sebastian. Sebastian comes from a cat sanctuary about 10 miles away from here, and we went to the sanctuary looking for another cat. Now, Mitzi's an indoor cat, and I think being an indoor cat is actually better for the cat because it is safer for them. I know there's a lot more to do outside, but it's much safer. So we were looking for another cat around Mitzi's age. She was 4 at the time. We said, well, we don't really care which gender, we don't care what colour or breed. All we want is around Mitzi's age, accustomed to being indoors and gets on with other cats. There were a few there, but quite a lot of them, even though they were accustomed to being indoors and they get on with other cats, there were a few that wouldn't even go near humans. They were terrified. They would cower away in the corner, and you think that you could probably win them round, but if they were going to be in a terrified state coming home, that might, Mitzi might not like that. So we met a few of the different cats that day, and we played with them, and we were about to leave, and then the wife and I heard a meow, meow. And of course there were cats everywhere. There was always kind of meows going on, but this was really loud. We turned around, and we'd been in the sanctuary for about 2 hours at this point, just playing with different cats, and we'd never noticed this cat before. We saw this black cat calling from inside one of the kennels. Now the whole sanctuary was lined with the kennels, but the cats were let out. The ones that could integrate were let out during the day, but this cat was in one of the kennels where he had some open floor space. He had his own litter tray with a hood over the top, and a heated it looked like a little bit like a mini conservatory in there. It looked very, very nice. And he had his claws on the mesh, and he was looking right at us, meowing and meowing and meowing. And I went over to him, and it was like he was trying to push his nose through the mesh. And I looked at the wife and I said, what about this one? Really, really friendly. And one of the volunteers came over and they said to us, oh, that's Sebastian. Yeah, he's lovely. He really is. But he's had surgery on his paws, and he's got a problem with his eye. And I noticed that his right eye was clouded. The cornea of it had some sort of it literally looked like steam for lack of a better term, had built up in his cornea. And they said, well, he can't come out because he's just had an operation on his paws. What happened was the pads on his front paws had ballooned up, and they taken a biopsy, and there were still stitches in his pads. So we went in, well, I went in first, and he was just lovely. He would come to his name. He was purring and purring. He loved head bumps, and then he would come over and actually head bump us in the face. He would stand on the hood of his litter tray and put his paws up at us. And we asked if he would be accustomed to being indoors, and they said, well, not really, because we found him as a stray. And we said, oh, we do have a back garden that he can have access to. And they said, well, that should be all right then. But because of his medical conditions, to cut a story short, we did actually eventually adopt him. We went back and forth a few times to see him and took him home. But because of his poor condition, his pads, even though they healed from the operation, his pads aren't... I mean, usually a cat's pads are soft, but they're tough, they're durable. His are not. They feel hollow. And that's why we have to have like sandy litter, not silicone, because it would hurt his paws. And when he came back to us, his paws were still huge. They have all gone down now, but as I said, they're very, very, they feel like they're full of just loose air. And a few weeks after we got him, because what happened was if I go back a bit, when we took him home, they said that we could take him home when we did, as long as we got him signed off by their vet. Not our vet that we use for Missy, but their vet. So we took him to a branch of their vet, and they had another look in his eye and said, well, we can't be sure it's an infection because he was on antibiotics. They said it's probably an old scar from an old injury. Okay, fine. 3 weeks later, it was a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'd got up, I fed the cats, and I went back to bed for a bit. Sebastian came into the bed. He's starting to bite me now. Stop it. He came into the bedroom and he laid down on me, and I leant up, I kissed his nose, and his nose was really wet. And then because I didn't have my glasses on, I noticed that I saw something drip from his eye. It was watering profusively. And even though we cleaned it up, nothing we did could stop it from watering. And it was watering so much, and it must have been for so long, that it had crusted under his eye, and even the fur under his eye was coming away from it. It was horrible, so we took him straight down the vet that day. The vet that we go to, really good, expensive, but you get what you pay for, really good vet. One of the veterinarians there is an eye specialist, and he had a look at Sebbie's eye and took him into another room where it was all dark, and they could actually have a look at his eye under like UV light or something else, like a dye. You know when you have your contacts done and they put dye in your eye and then shine a blue light in your eye. They found what was called a sequestrum in that eye, which is a build-up of blood vessels, which looks like a scab on the cornea. But this one was tiny, absolutely tiny, because most of the time you could just see the cloudiness, like that steam build-up, like condensation it looked like. But it was this tiny, tiny little sequestrum. You had to look very carefully to see it. So the vet said it's likely that he carries feline herpes, which is a bit like the cold sore virus. It lives in the spinal cord, but whenever the cat is under stress or gets an infection, the virus multiplies, and then it can flare up either in the lungs or the mouth or the eyes, and in this case it affected his eyes. Well, it affected one eye. Apparently it only stays on one side of the spinal cord, it doesn't affect the other. But what they did then was, there were several appointments. They took a swab from his neck and a swab from his eye, took it to the lab, and it came back with a negative reading for herpes. But the vet did say to me that even if it's a negative reading, it doesn't mean he doesn't have herpes. It just means that the virus is shedding at the point that they took the swabs. They gave us some drops for his eye, and it seemed to work to a certain degree. But then we had to go back and get some more, and eventually the fur under his eye began to grow back. It actually grew back quite quick. He seemed to be okay after that, and then the vet recommended that even though with herpes it's a virus and you can't get rid of it, is to prescribe a supplement called L-lysine. So it's one of the amino acids, the mirror of the lysine, so it's L-lysine. So he had half a chew a day, every day, didn't you? For 18 months. Every so often the vet would look into his eye whenever he had his checkups or whatever, and he's walked off now, and just see, if everything was okay, and everything seemed to be fine, until about 18 months later he got another bout of conjunctivitis. Again, we took him to the vet. Again, they gave us some drops and some like an eye moisturizer, and he seemed to be on the mend-ish. But on my 33rd birthday, we went out for a meal, came back about 11 o'clock at night, and I'm not kidding. I mean, I might put a picture up, and I'm going to warn you, if you see a picture in a moment of a cat's eye looking all gammy, it's not nice. Because the front of a cat's eye, the cornea, is like a bubble. The eye had perforated, and the outside the eye, the cornea had shriveled, and all the juice from the eye was down his face. It wasn't bleeding or anything. He was acting pretty normal, but he must have been in pain. We thought about maybe just, leaving it, see if how it would be in the morning. And I said, look, I can't leave him like that. So we called the emergency vet that night and took him in. Cost 120 quid. The vet gave him a painkiller, and he gave us 3 options, because what had happened was the sequestrum had ruptured the eye, which can happen. The sequestrum had come off. It was underneath his eye when I came home, so I actually found the sequestrum. The vet said 1 of 4 things can happen. You can leave it and it will plug and fill up again, but it could happen again. You could get another sequestrum and it could be worse. They could graft it for £900, but then it could still happen again. They could refer him to a specialist for £3,000, but there's no guarantee that they could save the eye. And Sebastian was insured, but because his eye problems happened before we got him, can't claim on the insurance. And I didn't have anywhere near £3,000 to spend. The 4th option actually seemed to be the best option, and even if I had lots of money, I think I would have gone for this option. The 4th option was to remove the eye, which would cost around £600. That would mean that he'd never have problems with that eye again, ever. And that would be it all sorted, because the other options were not even a guarantee that any of them could work or save him, and he probably would continue to have problems with that eye. So he was booked in for surgery the next day, and we took him in before going to work. We couldn't have that day off. And honestly, I was an inconsolable cat mummy that day. I was crying all day, thinking, how is my baby? I hope my baby's all right. And so after 5 o'clock, well, they said they'd message me when Sebastian was in recovery, and they messaged me at 4:30 and said that he was in recovery and doing well. We went to pick him up, and he had the blue cone of shame on, and a bit of blood was coming from his eye. It was really swollen, it was puffed out, and a little bit of blood had got onto the collar. I mean, the collar was soft and everything, so he could move around it easily, but it was just to stop him from rubbing his eye. When we got him home, as soon as we opened the carry case, he shot out, and the wife had to restrain him, otherwise he would have gone headfirst into the dryer. She had to be very quick. He was as high as a kite. The nurses said, yeah, he's been given a lot of pain medication. A lot. So not only was he pain-free, but he was off his face. And he was making all kinds of noises. He was almost like growling to himself, but it was like full of expression, like he was talking to himself. He was walking around like he owned the place. I mean, he does it anyway, but he was rubbing things with his face. And I was trying to say to him, Sebbie, can you stop it, please? You hurt yourself. And Mitzi, our other cat, bless her, this was so horrible and confusing for her too. She was hissing at him because, of course, he smelled differently. He looked different. Cats express a lot with their eyes, and that he was wearing a contraption around his head. She was, she wasn't good at all. So it was determined that the wife would stay in the bedroom with Mitzi and keep her calm. and I would stay in the living room with Sebastian, but Sebastian did not settle the whole night. I think at one point he got on top of me and he laid on me for a little bit, but most of it he was walking around chatting to himself, and it took a little while for him to calm down, and we had to keep giving him the painkillers every day so he was pain-free. And he had stitched like little eyelashes in his eye. He had to keep the collar on for 10 days, and it was after 2 weeks that the stitches came out, and he was as good as gold. The vets and the nurses all said he was just lovely. He would just let them put the catheter in, he wouldn't make a fuss, and he even head bumped the nurse after she took his stitches out. But so many people I've spoken to have said, "Oh, poor thing, he must." And there's no, seriously, he's fine. Honestly, he's fine. I don't think he could see out of the eye very well, and I think it was probably hurting him. He seemed to be so much happier since that surgery. You would not think at all that he's just got one eye. I've joked a lot of the time that he's my pirate cat, because he's got the one eye, and he's just still as gorgeous as ever. He did once have conjunctivitis in the other eye since the operation, but that was just the one-off. He's never had any other problems with that eye at all. The vet's very happy with that. He's always had a healthy weight. He loves to run around and play with we call Mitzi his big sister, even though they're not from the same litter. They're brother and sister, really. But he sleeps on top of me at night. He kisses me to wake me up in the morning. He's such a lovely, lovely boy. I think when we got him, there was something in the back of my head that was saying that eye is probably going to have to come out at some point. That's how my boy Sebastian lost his eye. I think that was the best option, really. I mean, it was the cheapest option by far, but even if it wasn't the cheapest, I would have opted for that, because that just eliminated the problems. And also, as I said, he probably couldn't see very well out of that eye, and even if he could see, it would have been a bit weird, so he must have had some sort of double vision or something going on. But that's how my cat became my one-eyed wonder. Anyway, I hope this was a fun anecdote, but thank you very much for watching, Little Berries, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye!